Okay, thanks everyone for joining us. We are going to now turn it over to Ms. Kristen Wolf. Over to you.
Great. All right, thank you. My name is Kristen Wolf, and I'm an admission counselor at Simmons University. I use she, her pronouns. I work with students who are from kind of all across the country. So we are a university in Boston, Massachusetts, but I work with students from California, Arizona, Tennessee, North Carolina, and a whole kind of slew of states across the US. I have two students with me today, Noah Cabral and Aaron Curley, who are going to introduce themselves now. Noah, do you want to start?
Yeah, so I'm Noah Cabral. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm a senior at Simmons studying history and political science, and I will be also getting my master's in education at Simmons. And I'm involved on campus in being a resident advisor, a former orientation leader, and I work for the Office of Admissions as well.
Oh, hi everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Still getting used to this after everything. But my name's Erin. I use she or they pronouns. I'm from Salem, Mass, so not too far from Boston. At Simmons, I'm double majoring in social work and economics, which has been a wonderful combination for me. I'm actually going to be continuing on to grad school in like a week, so that's exciting, where I'll be continuing social work. On campus, I've done a lot, but I've loved everything that I've done. I was also a part of the orientation program. I've worked in admissions for a while, and I've done a lot of peer education work through an office that is an extension of our Title IX office at Simmons.
Great. So today we're going to go through a little bit of the kind of overview of Simmons University as a whole. But we'll be stopping along the way to answer any questions you might have, and Noah and Aaron are also going to share some of their experiences as well. So to get started, let me just share this screen with you. All right. Okay, so today I think it's important to start by talking a bit about our history here at Simmons, because I do believe that it shapes a lot of what we do here. So we were actually founded as a women's college by a man named John Simmons. So he was really well known in the Boston area in the 1800s for helping shift customized sizing and clothing to a standardized sizing process. So as kind of a part of that growth, he had to employ a lot of women to help him sew a lot of clothing. And so when he passed away, he actually donated all of his money to create Simmons College. Today, he really kind of did this with the goal of giving women the ability to have a liberal arts education, but also to be getting the professional experience they need to enter the workplace and to, what he said, acquire an independent livelihood. Today, we really do kind of keep this history in mind, especially in our mission. And we've expanded to not only women, but also non-binary and trans folk across the country. And you'll kind of see today how a lot of our professional experiences are kind of woven into our curriculum here at Simmons. All right. So I think, and this kind of goes for every student looking at every college, so this is not a Simmons specific piece, but what you're really looking for is a school that kind of has that ideal fit for you. And it can really be a combination of so many of these factors on the screen, and even factors that aren't listed here. But when you kind of start the college search, especially I think as a junior or a senior coming into this, I think it's important to know what types of things are important when you're looking for a college. I know for some students, it really matters where they're going to be in the country, if they're going to be closer to home or they want to be farther away from home. That's a huge deciding factor. But you could also be somebody who's looking for a certain type of academic program, a certain type of major, and that can really influence your decision. I think a huge one for most students is usually the financial aspect of it. Are there adequate financial aid packages, things like that. So today, I hope you use this kind of framework and that you come in with an idea of maybe a little bit of what you're looking for. And I hope with this, you're able to kind of see if Simmons is kind of the ideal fit for you. All right. To give you a general overview of our university, we have about 1,800 students overall. So it's a very small university, very tight-knit community. we do have a good number of graduate programs. So you'll see that we have about 2,400 graduate students on the ground, and we actually have about 2,400 in online programs. I guess you could say we're all on online programs right now, given the COVID-19 pandemic. But on a kind of a normal time of the year, we have a pretty small community here at Simmons. Though we're pretty small, we actually have a good number of majors, around 60 different ones, which I'll outline in the upcoming slides. But we also have a lot of different clubs and organizations on campus and a lot of different kind of study abroad opportunities, as well as students kind of coming from not only all over the country, but from other countries as well. All right. I won't go too deep into all of these statistics, but things to note is we have a very small student to faculty ratio here at Simmons. On average, it's about 11 students per class. If you're anything like me, I went to a big public school in California, and I think my high school classes had about 35 students in them. So at Simmons, that's not the case. And you'll find that we have students kind of coming from all around. In addition to this, I think it's important to note that we are also a part of an organization of colleges within our neighborhood of Boston, Massachusetts, which is known as the Colleges of the Fenway. If you're familiar with what a consortium setup is like, what it is that we ourselves are one independent individual college, but with the 4 other universities, you are able to take classes at any of those other universities. You are able to join clubs and organizations across the 5 of these universities and do any kind of like study abroad opportunities, anything like that across the 5 of us. So I say this because you can get that small women-centered environment at Simmons, but on a greater scale, you have 4 other colleges that you can not only socialize with, but be able to take classes at. All right. So like I said, we're located in Boston, Massachusetts. I know you all are in North Carolina, so we're a little bit of a distance away, but not too far. Boston, if you're not familiar with the area, which I really wasn't when I jumped from coast to coast to visit and move eventually, we are very much a college city. So there are about 300,000 college students in Boston alone. And I think that makes about 1/4 of the population. So every 4th person you run into is likely to be a student. And the reason for that is Boston has about 15 plus colleges within the city bounds, if not more. So it really is a young college-oriented city. And there really are a lot of things to do around the city, whether that be going to Red Sox games or going to museums for free with your student ID. There's really never a lacking of things to do. And with that, there are so many different professional opportunities within the city of Boston, whether you are interested in government or you're interested in healthcare, there really is kind of a full array of things to internet to participate in during your college years. All right. So like I said, we have about 60 different majors and minors at Simmons, and what isn't listed here, but one thing to note is that you can actually minor in a lot of our majors at Simmons. So we do separate the minors just so that you can kind of see what specific minors we have, but you can actually get a minor often in psychology, or you can get one in economics, kind of any way you want to customize it. Another kind of unique thing to note is that Simmons has a lot of different accelerated programs, and what accelerated programs are degrees that you get a bachelor's degree in a shortened period of time, and then you're able to get a master's degree on that kind of last year. So at Simmons, we have several, and I would say our most popular one is probably the 3-year bachelor's degree in political science, economics, or sociology, with that 1-year degree in public policy. So you'd get a master's in public policy. But we also see a lot of students interested in our accelerated degrees in social work as well as physical therapy. So if you are one of those students who does kind of know that they want to do a certain career after they graduate, or you have certain professional goals, these accelerated programs are pretty unique and ones I encourage you to look at, especially if they do align with those career goals. Other than that, I would say we have several majors at Simmons that end up being pretty popular. So one of them would be nursing, but we also have a lot of students in our social work programs, our political science programs, our communications programs, as well as our business programs. So if you are interested and kind of want to know what brings a lot of students to Simmons, those majors generally speaking do. All right, so I'm going to open the floor a little bit to talk a little bit about what our curriculum looks like in addition to the major coursework that you do. So you will be fulfilling your credits to get a degree at Simmons, but one component of this that kind of harkens back to our mission is that you are required to do some sort of real world learning as a part of your curriculum. So I'm going to encourage our seniors to talk a bit about what their professional experiences look like. And if they can restate their majors, I think that would be helpful in seeing what those professional experiences are like.
Yeah, so I am a political science and history major doing a 4+1 program in education. So with those 3 programs, I've done internships, field work, as well as research. So for my political science degree, I am currently an intern in Massachusetts State Senator Becca Rausch's office. So prior to the pandemic, I was heading to the State House 3 times a day, not 3 times a day, 3 times a week to fulfill my internship, which was a major part of my semester. And then for education, I've done fieldwork placements in various Boston public schools and classrooms to get experience in the classroom setting. And then for my history degree, I have done research and am currently on a team of 12 undergraduate students working in the Simmons University archives to look into Eva Whitting-White, who was the first social work major at Simmons and really propelled the social work program at Simmons.
So that seems like a good transition for me to step in. As I mentioned before, I'm double majoring in social work and economics, but I primarily have career interests in pursuing social work. I just decided to add on econ because I think it's interesting, quite honestly. But a lot of the real world learning and kind of the professional experiences I've had have been centered around my passions in social work. I've done field placements at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, working as a patient and family advocate. I've also had a work study and a volunteer service position at the Museum of Fine Arts, actually, in Boston, working with a team in their education department to create exhibits for youth, particularly for youth of color, to engage with. I've also, most recently, the internship that I've had to end was with a local area rape crisis center, serving as a rape crisis counselor for various Boston hospitals and sort of working as an on-call person within that role. And I've loved all the experiences I've had. It's not only made my classwork more enriching, but it's been a really critical component of building connections and my confidence and things like that.
Great, thank you. And I want to encourage anyone, if you do have questions along the way, if in particular you want to ask Noah or Aaron a question, you can send those in the chat box. And I can also stop and see if you would like me to. All right. So in addition to your professional experience, your academic experience, a lot of ways that students will complement their education is by going on a study abroad trip. And what this consists of is fulfilling a semester, a year, or even a couple of weeks abroad to get credit towards your major. And so we have over 24 different study abroad options. So we can send you about anywhere in the world, any continent that is, except for Antarctica. So if you are someone who has ambitions of going abroad, I do encourage you to consider the possibility of doing that. A lot of our study abroad opportunities actually fall in line with our tuition. So if you are considering kind of the financial components of it, you can go abroad and still kind of pay the same thing or that you'd be paying at Simmons. So there are 24 opportunities through Simmons, but if there is a certain country that you'd like to go to, perhaps to study a certain language that we don't have a partnership with, you can actually take advantage of the Colleges of the Fenway organization that I talked about earlier in order to go abroad, perhaps through one of their programs. So there's a lot of flexibility there, and something I really appreciate about being a small college, but also having the resources of other universities nearby. Okay. Kind of in line with this, I do think there are so many ways to complement your education, but also make sure that you have all the tools you need to succeed at Simmons. And one way that we've kind of consolidated those resources over the past years have been to create the Center for Student Success, which is a kind of one-stop shop kind of location on campus where you can accomplish a lot of different things. So to get started, first off, we do have our Office of Accessibility Services. This is a photo that we do need to change because it's no longer called Disability Services. But really, Accessibility Services is there to help you if you need any sort of test accommodations, if there's certain living accommodations that you need in order to succeed at a university, anything like that. They kind of work with you on a one-on-one basis to protect confidentiality, but also to make sure that you're getting your individual needs. In addition to that, I know a huge concern for students as they're thinking about college and what a degree will mean for them is what kind of career you'll have after you graduate, but also gaining the professional skills you need in order to get those jobs. So the second office that's located here is our career education office. And you can go and meet with a career coach to kind of talk through whatever professional skills that you would like to develop. I know a lot of students will go in for kind of resume and cover letter help, but really if you kind of have a career-oriented concern, you can go and meet with a career coach to help you along the way. In addition to that, we also have our global education office. This is where you would go if you want to study abroad, but also if you are an international student and you have any kind of visa concerns or anything along those lines, we have a lot of professionals in the global education office that can help you kind of through that process as an international student. In addition to those, we have our academic advising offices located here. And this is a really great resource for planning your schedules from semester to semester. So I don't know about other students, but I know when I was entering college, a big concern for me was how do I know how to plan my courses? That was something that I didn't understand because high school kind of outlines what you're supposed to take and when you're supposed to take it. So in your academic advising experience, you will have an advisor help you through choosing your classes each semester, and they're able to meet with you multiple times if you have kind of concerns as the semester goes on in terms of your progression through your major, or you want to switch your major or anything like that. Your academic advisor will work with you one-on-one, and they can set up appointments with you whenever you need to. All right, and then last but definitely not least, is our writing and tutoring center. So for the writing center, a huge part of the college experience is writing, depending on what your major is. There is usually writing components to every different field. So if you are someone who maybe struggles with writing or you don't know exactly what college writing should look like, I recommend, and this goes for all colleges, but especially Simmons, I would recommend going to the writing center. They have a bunch of graduate students on campus who will help you with your writing, as well as kind of address any consistent kind of issues that you may be seeing in your writing. And then the tutoring offices are a little different, but they are run by students on campus, so undergraduate students at Simmons, and they teach or tutor for classes, specific classes that you may approach in your time at Simmons. So I know like students will teach certain, or they'll tutor for certain classes that they were able to receive an A- or higher in, so they kind of know exactly what is expected for those courses. And it's kind of nice to be able to just meet one-on-one with a student and have them kind of help you through the class that you might be struggling with. I should say that all of these resources at Simmons are free, so this isn't an additional cost to anything in your billing, but something I definitely recommend taking advantage of if you do end up at Simmons. All right. So I'm going to kind of shift gears here a little bit and talk about kind of we really covered the academic experience here, but I think it's important to kind of talk about the things outside of your academic experience, because I do believe that complementing these help you along the way and ensure that you can get to that great degree after 4 years, creating a sense of community so that you feel like you have the support systems in place to succeed. And one of the ways that we do that at Simmons is we do have our multicultural center. And I don't want to over talk about it because I know our students will have such good things to say about it. But really, this is a space, especially if you are a marginalized student or a student of color, this is a space to find community. It's a space to experience kind of activism. They have a lot of cool speakers that come on campus. So I don't know if Noah, do you want to start off and talk about the Multicultural Center a bit?
Yeah, so I can start off. Our Multicultural Center is the kind of hub on campus and also the overseeing kind of body of the affinity orgs on campus. So our affinity orgs are student-led, undergraduate student-led organizations that relate to specific identities. So our oldest organization in that is the Black Student Organization, BSO. The second oldest is our Latinx organization, OLA, and then we have several other organizations that have come up throughout time. So the organization that I'm a part of that is part of the Multicultural Center is our Trans and Non-Binary Collective, which we call ourselves TANK. And being a student in TANK and like coming to Simmons and not really being sure of my identity has really like allowed me to explore my identity and also to feel confident in who I am and advocate for students, for trans students on campus. And that is kind of TANK's biggest mission, is to advocate for trans students. And we would not be able to do that without the support of the Multicultural Center, which has its own director as well as a program coordinator who have offices in the center. So you don't have to like go and find them on campus. They're always there and always talking to students. So that's kind of the biggest part for the center for me. And then something fun that I really love is that each of the organizations gets to host a photo series or art series in the center. And it's like a rotating exhibit. So I love coming in every few months and seeing like a brand new exhibit go up on the walls.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Noah. The multi, as we call it, the multi for short, is really a pretty universal space in terms of what it can be used for. I've seen folks come in to do lectures. I've seen we've brought in people to do yoga, crafts, dinners, potlucks, game nights, you name it. There have been all kinds of events held in that space, as well as the affinity orgs tend to host most of their annual or reoccurring meetings in this space as well. So it's very well loved, it's very well used, and it really has become a central part, I think, to the community at Simmons. I do also want to acknowledge that I see a lot of your questions in the chat, and I think that we will be getting to those kind of as we move throughout the presentation, but I just wanted to let you know that I've seen those. So.
Great. Yeah, so I see the questions as well. So we'll get to some of these in the presentation, but I will also look at them again towards the end to make sure that all of them are answered. Great. So to talk a bit more about kind of creating community outside of the academic experience, and I think this is important for all students to know wherever college you go. I think it's extremely important to find some sort of extracurricular kind of thing that can help create community for you, because college is such a different experience. And I think if you can join something, if you can find a physical space on campus where you feel welcome, I think that really helps as you progress through your degree. Another way that you can do that, we talked about physical spaces, but I think it's also good to acknowledge all of the clubs and organizations that we have here at Simmons. So whether you're really interested in music or you're interested in government, activism, things like that, finding a club or organization that aligns with that is super important. At Simmons, we have over 80 or 90 clubs and organizations, but we also have different things depending on what you're interested in. So let's say you're really interested in sports. We have intramural sports that you can play not only at Simmons, but across the colleges of the Fenway. We have a lot of different performing arts groups. So if you're really interested in playing in an orchestra or you want to be in a theater program, those are also across the 5 of us. In addition to that, there are so many different community service opportunities. So if you're someone who really likes to give back, being in a major city, there are so many things that you can do depending on what you're interested in. I know there are people who are really interested in environmentalism, so they help clean up the river every weekend. But then there are students who really want to, help students or help people who are homeless. And there are several ways that you can do that throughout the city. So definitely a lot of opportunities throughout. And then lastly, we have a lot of different jobs on campus. And I think that's important to note if you know, like you want to have a job on campus or you qualify for work study opportunities. We have a lot of opportunities in admissions, but not only admissions. We have several different across academic departments and across the campus altogether. All right. So I think one question I get a lot is kind of what does this all amount to? What does attending Simmons do for you as a student? And I think first off, kind of in the general way of measuring a school, our students are doing really well after they graduate. So we have about 91% of our students are employed or are in grad school within 6 months of graduating from Simmons. And I believe the national average is around 80 right now. I'm not entirely sure what the pandemic will look like, but with that in mind, we are kind of performing higher than average. In addition to that, our average salary is about $2,000 above the average in Boston, so $47,000. And then we have a lot of students who are hired within the field of their major. So while I think it's totally okay to major in one thing and then end up working in another field, that's what I did entirely. I think it's important to note that a lot of the skill sets and a lot of the things you're learning along the way at Simmons are equating to a certain career field. And I think that you, as students, are gaining kind of the skills you need in order to enter those fields, which I think is worth acknowledging. In addition to that, Simmons is a women-centered institution. So I know I have students who are very excited about it. We get students who are very apprehensive about the experience. But I think it's important to note some of the success rates of being a women-centered institution. So students who do attend women-centered colleges, they are twice as likely to pursue graduate level degrees. And you can kind of read through the statistics, but I think it's more important to note the personal experiences of students. So Noah and Erin, I don't know if you want to share what the women-centered experience has meant to you.
Yeah, sure, I can share. So Simmons was actually the only women-centered institution that I applied to, and Simmons was also the last school that I applied to, kind of on a whim, and I'm so happy that I did because I think senior year, young Erin in the past didn't quite understand the value of a women-centered space until I was actually immersed in it and I started to connect with it. And now as I'm a graduating senior, I realized just how formative Simmons has been. I look back when I was applying to schools and even just how I was as a senior in high school, I thought that I was very confident and outspoken and sure of myself. And then once I got to campus, I realized just how much room for growth I had and how far I've come throughout that time. Also, one of my biggest things with a women-centered space is kind of the emphasis on it being more, it feels more collaborative. It feels as if success is something we all share and we all invest in. And when you're doing well and you're the cohort of students you're a part of is succeeding, that reflects on you as well. And again, I think back at some of the other schools, really large co-ed institutions and very different from Simmons. And so I'm happy to say that I'm at a space that feels a lot more collaborative than really competitive, especially in the classroom. So it's been great. And as corny as it sounds, I can't imagine having gone to any other school. So.
Yes, I can definitely echo off of that. When I applied to Simmons, I did not realize that it was a women-centered college. And then when I attended an open house, I realized that just the environment and how friendly and supportive everyone was something that I was looking for. So that really narrowed down my college search. And then in the end, I did choose Simmons. And like the collaboration with success really echoed with me, because my internship in the State House was actually a fellowship among other seniors at Simmons. And if one of us was ever lost in the building, because it is a very large building with like summit floors and just like new construction that doesn't align with old construction. So if we were ever lost or something, like there was always another Simmons student in the building that was able to help us. But also there's Simmons alums that were in the building as well, just like working post-graduation. And so I think that connection with like me being a current student, but also alums was super important. And I think that that connection is also stronger attending a women's-centered college. So I'm really grateful that I did attend. And the question about visitors, I can definitely address. So I was an RA on campus for 3 years, and our visiting policy is very relaxed. So you are welcome to bring any guests that you would like. Our like main rules is that the person just can't stay more than 3 consecutive nights. So if a friend wants to stay for the weekend, that's totally fine. And then you just have to okay it with your roommate. You don't have to okay it with your RA or with public safety or with res life. It's just really you and your roommate and whoever else may live in the room with you.
Great. All right. So I think before we jump into the application process, I'd love to talk a little bit more about the campus culture. And I think Dwayne asked a couple of questions that I think I'd love to hear more from Noah and Erin about. So what word comes to mind when you think of Simmons culture? And how would you kind of describe our culture on campus?
It's hard to pick only one word because I feel like there are so many things that I could speak to and so many adjectives that would relate to different parts of my Simmons experience. But I'd say overall, when I think of Simmons, and particularly when I think of my experience as a senior, it's been really empowering for me. Every opportunity that I wanted to take on, every goal that I've set for myself, I've had people along the way who have always said yes. I've never been met with a no. When I wanted to take 6 classes and work and do an internship, people told me that it would be a lot, but they never said like, no, you can't do that or you can't handle that. And everyone's just been supportive with everything that I've wanted to pursue. Also in the classroom, like, I don't feel like I have to compete to have my voice being heard. I don't feel like I'm being talked over. If anything, I feel like sometimes I lead the conversations, and I don't know how I got to be that student because, again, I don't think I was that outspoken in high school, and yet here I am. I think Simmons has just brought it out of me. So I really would say it's very empowering. Like, I've made the most of my time at Simmons because I saw so many people doing so many things, involved in so many things. They had all of these things outside of the classroom that they were passionate about, and it's kind of made me feel like, well, if they can do it, so can I, and I'm going to give it a shot. And like I said, everyone along the way has been incredibly supportive of me and really empowered me to like take things a step further. So that's my word.
Yeah, finding one word is hard. I would say I'm going to borrow from you and say passionate. I think that a lot of Simmons students, like part of Simmons culture is like having a passion for what you're doing and what you're trying to accomplish. And so like for me, have my passion lies in supporting LGBT students. And that is why I'm going towards policy and also education. Because for me, I believe that supporting LGBT students really allows them to get through education, which a lot of students aren't able to. And so that passion at Simmons has never, like, it has been like challenged in me challenging the administration to be more supportive. But for students, I've always met great support in students wanting to like be with me to challenge the administration and to make our campus more inclusive.
Great. And then I think another question that's so important is talking about what has been your most challenging experience at Simmons and what kind of university resources we have that helped you navigate those challenges. That's a great question, Jane.
I think
go ahead.
One of my most challenging experiences was towards the end of my first year. I originally came in as a political science major in the 3+1 public policy program, and I took one history course and realized that I still loved history from high school. I don't know why I was lying to myself, and wanted to pursue the major. And I was just lost because I knew that I could not do the 3+1 and also pursue history because it's that shortened major. And I sat in my academic advisor's office for about an hour and a half, and we planned out all like the next 3 years of my college courses that I would have to take to both do history and political science. And in the end, I ended up doing a political science minor from that meeting. And now I'm graduating with a political science major. So we worked it out. I've gone back and forth with my majors a lot. But just being in my advisor's office with like someone who really cared about what I was interested in was really helpful for navigating how uncertain I was about which majors to pursue.
I'd say one of my most challenging experiences has actually been this past year as a part of the field work I do for my social work major. It's very emotionally intense and very draining work. And while it's been an amazing experience, I don't think I could have made it as far as I did doing crisis intervention work in emergency rooms and ICUs alongside people with all kinds of training and experience. Definitely, I feel as if Simmons, they prepare you as best as you can, but you do reach a certain point with any career where you just kind of have to take a step out there and dive in head first. And the support that I received from my social work professors, my field instructor, and also what we refer to the social work, each grade, the class, we refer to it really as a cohort because we move throughout the social work curriculum, taking all of the same classes together. So these are people I've known since my very first year at Simmons. We've gone through the educational experience, the fieldwork experience together. And so for me, having witnessed so much sexual trauma in medical settings, having that backbone of my social work cohort and just the department in general, with such an emphasis on caring for yourself, understanding that this is a part of the learning curve, making meaning of all of these things has been like incredibly meaningful to me. And like I said, with something as intense as social work, I'm really thankful for the model that we have. Something is right there. There's some kind of magic with the cohort model because really it feels like a group, almost as if it's like a second family. Like I've known these people for so many years, and we've just become so incredibly supportive of one another.
Great. So I'm going to answer a few questions here, and then we'll hop into the application process a little bit. So in terms of our retention rate from our first to second year, it is, I think, around 82%. And then our graduation rate within the 6th year, I think we have ours within a 4 years, so it's a 79%. All right, and then I'll talk a bit more about our financial aid packages in the next couple of slides, and then we'll get to how Simmons stands out towards the end. All right, so I'm going to put some averages on our screen. I never like to have students get too sucked into these scores just because I know the temptation is really easy, especially when you feel like you have to compare yourself to the numbers. But I'd really like to encourage students to not focus in so much because these are just averages. So at Simmons, We have an average unweighted GPA of a 3.7 and an average SAT and ACT at 1,226 respectively. But what I might encourage you to do is look more at the middle 50% just below, because I think this is definitely a more accurate picture of what the middle portion of our applicant pool looks like. But we use a holistic application review model in our admissions office, which means, and we're really lucky in this case because we work with a small student population, we can spend a lot of time getting to know the students. If there are students that we have more questions about, we have the time to reach out to them. We have a lot of the ability to just dig a little bit deeper to learn the student's story, which has been a hugely gratifying part of my job, is that I don't have to make rash decisions about students, and I can really get to know them a lot more. Overall, we're really looking for students who kind of show the traits in the right-hand portion of the screen. So we really love passionate students. And I don't know if you noticed that with Noah and Aaron, but that's something that just radiates from them for me. People who really care about their community, whether that is Boston or maybe it's their home community in Durham, North Carolina, whatever it is, just showing passion for your community in whatever way that means to you really sticks out to us in the admissions process. And we like students who are open-minded, who challenge themselves, whether that be in the classroom, they take courses that are a little challenging for them, or they kind of show in their personal statement ways that they've been able to change their mind, things like that. These are the things we're looking for, the things that I wish were more quantitative, but really it's just something that's not as tangible and something I encourage you to feel like you can express as much about yourself in the application process. I will say here are our requirements. These are pretty standard for most colleges. So we do require an application either through the Common App or through our own online application. Our applications are entirely free. So there's no cost associated with submitting an application to Simmons. So I do kind of encourage students, if they are even slightly interested, there isn't a huge financial barrier to that. This year, I don't want to go through every piece of this list because I do think it is pretty standard. But the one thing I do want to note is that for the upcoming school year, we are test optional. And the reason for that is that there's been a huge barrier to access for the SAT and ACT. So if you have any questions about that, I can provide my email address and we can talk a little bit more. But just know that in the next admission cycle, we will not ask for test scores. And then lastly, the one thing I recommend to all students, particularly if you have a part of your life or something that you would prefer to talk to an admission counselor about, or even a senior fellow, which is what Noah and Aaron are. You can talk one-on-one with a current student or a counselor through doing an interview. Our interviews are completely optional and they do not make decisions on your application at Simmons. So I think that that's really important to note because some colleges will interview you and it's mandatory and it determines whether you get into the university or not. At Simmons, that's not the case. And I like to kind of share it as like an opportunity to add to your application off of a piece of paper. For students in North Carolina who will be watching this, you can do an interview online. So you can either do it through Zoom or through a phone call. If admission counselors are able to travel there in the fall, we will have an admission counselor visiting this fall to North Carolina if students want to do an interview then, and they can do that at like a coffee shop or something like that. Some other things that may be required in your application depending on what your application looks like. So if you are interested in those accelerated programs that we talked about, they usually have an additional essay requirement that go along with them. So just be mindful of that when you're looking through the application. Just make sure that you are able to answer that question. It's not very long. I think it's just an additional 250 words or so. So just to tag that along with your application. If you're interested in our honors program, I believe it's about 10% of our student population are in the honors program. You would need to submit another essay and those prompts are online. For the Kotzen essay, this is something I'll talk a bit more about in the financial aid component, but Our Cotson Scholarship is a full ride scholarship that students can apply for. For those who are interested, we generally award 10 to 15 of those per year. So I do encourage students to submit the Cotson Scholarship essay. If you do qualify, we do recommend that students have at least a 3.3 GPA and that they're taking the most rigorous classes at their high school, depending on what is offered at your high school. With this upcoming year, I'm not entirely sure what it will look like with test optional. So it may be that test scores are not even needed in the Cotson scholarship process, which I then would encourage students to even more apply to Cotson. But as you might imagine, we don't have all the information yet, but just something to keep on your radar if you're looking for a way to cover your full tuition and housing at Simmons. Okay, so we have a few questions. So Jane, though you moved to optional test scores for next year, is there a circumstance in which you would encourage students to take and submit their test scores? Yeah, I would think that if you are a student who has maybe a lower GPA, and by lower, I would mean more around the 2.5 range, and maybe a history of academics that's not indicative of your academic ability, I would say that I may encourage you to take the test if it's within, within the realm of possibility for you. I wouldn't want to, force anyone to take the SAT or the ACT, but if in that case you feel comfortable taking a standardized test and you want to be able to kind of show to an admission counselor that your grades are not fully representative of your ability, then I might encourage you to do that. But I also would encourage you to have an interview with either admission counselor or senior fellow, just so that you can kind of explain yourself a little bit more, just so that when I review your application, it's not just me looking at your transcript, but I'm seeing kind of the full story of your academic experience. I hope that answers your question. All right, so let's talk a bit more about merit scholarships. So we actually just changed our merit scholarships amount, so this doesn't reflect it, but we offer every student accepted to Simmons will receive a merit scholarship. So they'll receive anywhere from $18,000 to $27,000. We have 5 ranges across those amounts. And we determine this solely based on your application. So this is with no regard to your financial need. So this is encouraging if you are someone who is not able to fill out FAFSA. I'm thinking a lot of international students, and I know there's a few questions about that within the chat box right now. But this is something where we don't need the FAFSA information. We don't need any sort of information from the federal government. This is something we'll award based on the strength of your application. So for this, I do really encourage you, since we are a holistic application process, if you can showcase like all of your abilities into an application, that might mean more merit aid for you. And the one thing I do really recommend in your application, I know some students will maybe not know that putting down taking care of family members, doing a part-time job, things like along those lines do count as activities for us. So I do encourage you to put, all of those things onto your application so that we can get a better picture of kind of your academic experience, but also the things you do in your free time. What are your average test scores and GPA for the highest merit scholarship of 25K? So it's good to note that our merit scholarships are not based on average test scores or GPA. It's a culmination of the activities that you have on your application. So being involved is really great. Working a significant number of hours per week, or babysitting siblings, babysitting people in your neighborhood, things like that actually come into the equation there. And we also are considering the rigor of your high school in that. So when we're looking at your application, we are considering the school profile of the school that you attended to see, we're kind of measuring your rigor a little bit. So did you take the challenging courses that were offered at your high school? And it's solely kind of based on that. So it's a complicated algorithm. And I say that hopefully to be encouraging in that you don't need to hit a certain amount to get a certain amount of merit scholarship. Like you don't need to get a certain SAT to get a certain number. So I hope that helps a little bit with that question. Okay, so let's talk about paying for tuition at Simmons. Definitely a lot of questions around this. So our tuition at Simmons is around $41,000. For nursing students in particular, it is higher because nursing students at Simmons have a lot of resources that other students do not need, but are required for nursing students. So I'm thinking clinicals, being placed in those clinicals, lab spaces, things like that. So there's definitely a lot of components to nursing that add to that. And then room and board is around $15,000, which is kind of around the cost of living in Boston, depending on how you break it down. For Simmons, our average financial aid package is around $32,000. So that kind of, fluctuates depending on what your need is. But the average cost of attendance after you attend or after your financial aid package is around $29,000. All right. What is the average loan debt of Simmons students? That's a great question. I don't have the exact number, but I can look into that and get back to you. We do have a significant number of students who do receive debt or do receive loans. And that is kind of a result of not being able to meet full need. But we do have significant scholarships and grants to help bring down that loan debt. But I don't have an actual number, so I can get that for you afterwards. All right. So once you kind of submit all of your information, you submit the FAFSA form through the federal government, you'll want to get in all of those things for one of our deadlines. So we have 3 different deadlines at Simmons. I usually encourage students to apply to the deadline that helps show them in the best light. So if you're a student who needs another semester of high school on your transcript before you feel comfortable applying to Simmons, then I would recommend applying by February 1st. But if you are somebody who wants to get your application in early so you hear back sooner, then I might recommend throwing in your application before November 1st. Either way, we read our decisions pretty quickly. After these deadlines, we are able to mail your decision within 5 to 6 weeks of those deadlines. So I do say that it does give students a lot of time to kind of figure out not only their finances, but kind of gives you a couple of months to figure out what makes sense for your next step. The one thing I will say is if you are applying to the Kotzen scholarship that I mentioned earlier, you will want to submit everything by December 1st so that you can be considered for that scholarship. All right. We do have a Boston scholarship. This is a scholarship specifically for Boston public school students, so it's not relevant in this case. But if you are interested in those accelerated programs or the honors programs, you want to make sure to submit additional essays along with your application to the university, with the last days being February 1st of each year if you decide to apply a little bit later in the cycle. All right. And then once you kind of get all of that, you have your May 1st decision deadline, and this goes for all colleges usually. This year was a little bit different for some. They were extending their deadlines due to the COVID-19 pandemic. But for us, we just had our May 1st deadline and we made our class. So it's a kind of a fun circle to go around. And I hope that next year it's equally fun for those juniors who are listening. And for students kind of preceding that. All right. So we're not nearly done with all of our questions, but I'd love to kind of take a quick break to have Noah and Erin share any application tips they might have, or kind of share anything like that that might be useful at this point.
Yeah, I think when in doubt, don't second guess putting something that you've done on your application. If you think like, oh, I've only just tried this, or I haven't been doing it as long as some other people, or if you've played a sport and you've been on junior varsity and you haven't been on the varsity team, like just put it on there. When I received my acceptance to Simmons, they actually included quite a few things that I had put on my application that I sort of thought were interesting and that maybe they would also think would be interesting. Things that I had like just recently started trying, new sports towards the end of my senior year, things like that. And they wrote that right in my letter, that they thought it was really cool that I would try something new. So I recommend, like, don't be too afraid to put something on there and think deeply about, like, what will that mean on the other end. Like, if anything, we'll be happy to see that you're willing to try new things and explore what your school has to offer. My other tip would be to try to think a little bit longer about who you ask for letters of recommendation from. So a lot of people might be really tempted to just ask a teacher that they know, but if you have, let's say you work a part-time job, and your manager could speak really well on, like, your work ethic or your organization, or you have a coach that you've really connected with and they can talk about your leadership. Like, it doesn't always have to be a teacher or someone in an academic role that can write you a letter of recommendation. You should think really, like, outside of the box if you can.
Something that I would encourage folks to do is to apply. Simmons does not charge an application fee, and that is the reason why I applied to Simmons, and I also got into Simmons. And so for me, I would definitely encourage you to apply, even if you're still a little bit on the fence, because you can apply and then learn more about the college, and make your decision after you receive your decision.
And there's a quick question about activities that I think are important to list on your application. And this will go for all colleges, not just Simmons, but important ones that students sometimes don't think are important. And I think I touched on these a little bit, but my most common thing that students don't put on there is when they take care of siblings, or they take care of grandparents, or they take care of other people in their family or in their community. I think a lot of students will value this as kind of a family obligation of some sort, but that we do value that as an institution, and we do want to give you kind of that credit, given that that's time you're taking out of your free time to help another human being. So that kind of contributes to our understanding of you as kind of it gives you that boost for community. But that would just be one big thing that I think that students don't often put on their applications. But we usually, as admission counselors, are able to kind of decipher that information from a personal statement or from a letter of recommendation. Sometimes we're able to find out that the student does this part-time job in their free time, or they do care for their grandmother on the side, things like that. We will kind of pick out of letters of rec and pick out of personal statements and include in the overall activities. But if you want to just put it in there and put your time commitment, I always encourage students to do that. And then I think students don't often put, like, hobbies that take time for them, because we do think that kind of being intellectual, finding a new hobby that really interests you. I encourage students to put that on there, whether that's canvassing for a local political candidate, or playing an instrument individually for certain hours a day. I think that those are really valuable, but students don't know that they're always valuable to do that. Great. So that wraps up the, and I want to be mindful of time, but that wraps up the presentation. There are a few questions in here I think that I haven't answered. So do I recommend that students fill out the activity section or upload a resume, or can they just upload a resume? They can actually do either one they're more comfortable with. I don't have students who often have a resume ready yet in high school. They might if they've applied for maybe part-time jobs or things like that. Just so long as their resume actually shows everything that they do, I would be perfectly fine looking at a resume instead of the activity section. But what I think is good about the Common App activity section is that it prompts you to put how much time you spend doing things. And I think it forces somebody to really think about the amount of hours they dedicate each week to an activity. And it also gives them a little bit of kind of appreciation for themselves too, and gives value to that. All right. So there was a question, and this I think is a good wrap up. Noah and Aaron, I think out of all the universities in Boston, I know you two are more local than maybe someone from North Carolina, but could you maybe explain why, with all the universities in Boston, you chose Simmons, and what makes Simmons stand out?
I think for me, I didn't really realize that I wanted to be in Boston until I was thinking about what I wanted to do with my major. And I had applied to schools all throughout New England, but Simmons was the only one in Boston that I applied to. Um, and something that really set Simmons apart, once I applied and then started looking at other Boston schools, is how small the community was, and the community feel. Because the other colleges in Boston are like Boston University, Harvard, MIT, Northeastern, which are all very large institutions. And after touring a few of those in greater New England, I realized that that is not what I wanted. So I think that small community is really what sets Simmons apart from other Boston schools.
Yeah, so my application process was a little all over the place. I'm actually a first generation college student, so I was applying to any and all schools that I thought sounded good or were free, or that I just had enough time to apply to. And thankfully, I ended up at Simmons because it's been great for me. But I think what kind of made it stand out from a lot of the other schools was that Simmons was the first school I felt like they wanted me to go there. All the other schools, it very much gave off a vibe like you're lucky you got in, or like you should be really grateful you got waitlisted. You're one of like 30,000 this year. And I definitely kind of felt like I even got lost in the shuffle of my own application process. And then once I received my letter from Simmons, it really felt like, wow, they read what I had put on my application. They talked to my letters of recommendation, the folks who wrote those. They would call me, like the admissions office had current students that would reach out if I had any questions. And I got this feeling like they really want me to come here. And that stood out to me so immensely. I think, especially when you think of colleges and universities anywhere, but in Boston, there are a lot of these really competitive schools that lots of students apply to that are very well known for their name. And with that, I think comes a little bit of this competitive edge. And so for a while before I had heard from Simmons, I really didn't know what school I was going to go to. I was waiting to get that kind of feeling like, you know, when the shoe fits or something, when I try it on or whatever. And then thankfully, like that happened to be Simmons for me. Yeah, we really I think when we see the potential in applicants and we can tell that they are going to do well at Simmons, like, of course we would want them to attend. And we want anyone who wants to experience the women-centered aspect of education, to have that experience, so.
Great. Thank you so much for having us today, and I'll be sure to share some more information to the questions you have. I just want to make sure that I give you the correct information before sharing. Are there any other questions that you may have? I'm going to stop sharing my screen for now. Any other things we can help with?
I think that's everything. And the good thing is that we now have each other's contact information, so we will always reach out to you. I honestly learned a lot about great things about Simmons. I went to school, by the way, in Boston College,
Oh, yeah.
but I didn't know all the great deeds you were doing until just now. So I'll be sure to send many students your way, and we hope that we can continue to stay in touch with each other as we introduce more of our students here in Durham to Simmons, because you obviously have a lot to offer. And I hope it's okay with you for us to refer students to you as well. We'll share your email.
Yeah.
And thank you all very much. Noah and Erin, we really appreciate your insight, and your experience means a lot to us as other students will listen, so that they can make better judgment about what colleges to apply to and ultimately what colleges to enroll in. Thanks to you too, Kristen.
Thank you so much. We really appreciated your time.
Thank you.
Bye.